Hello everyone, this is Textant and welcome to today's video. Today's topic is the difference between selection sort and insertion sort in Python. Yes, both of them sorts elements, but the process or the procedure is actually very different. So if I gave you a list containing 3, 5, 2, 1, and 4, using either insertion or selection sort, both will give us at the end 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the procedure is very different. With the selection sort, what do we do first is we suppose that the first element at the first index is the minimum value. Then we iterate through the sequence or the list and search from start to end a value that is smaller than the value we suppose to be the minimum value and place it in the first index. So let's start with this list in front of you. We have 3, 5, 2, 4, and 1 and we will use selection sort to sort it out. First we need to iterate through this list. But how many times? Well, we need to iterate n times and n representing the length of the list. So the length of the list is 5, so n, 5. We need to iterate 5 times. Starting with the first iteration, we suppose that the minimum value is 3. Okay, so 3 is at the first index, so we suppose that the first element at the first index is the minimum value. So what I'll do is, I'll compare 3 and 5. Well, 3 is less than 5, so nothing will happen. 3 is less than 2? No, so the new minimum value will become 2. 2 less than 4? Yes, nothing will happen. 2 less than 1? No. So I'll erase 2 and instead I'll add 1. Okay, now the loop finishes. But what to do next? We need to swap 1 and 3. So I'll swap 1, it will become 1 here, 5, 2, 4, and then 3. But before we go to the second iteration, we know that we have a sorted part or a sorted list right here and an unsorted list right here. So those elements are not sorted while this element is at the correct position. Right now let's go to the second iteration. What we'll do is we'll suppose that the minimum value is 5. So m representing minimum value is 5. Let's compare 5 with the other numbers. So 5 less than 2? No, it's greater than, so we'll replace it by 2. 2 less than 4? Yes. 2 less than 3? Yes, so the minimum value is 2. What to do is I need to swap 2 and 5. So 1, 2, 5, 4, and 3. Now I will repeat the procedure one more time. So at the third iteration, we'll suppose that first this is a sorted list. Those numbers are sorted, while this list right here is unsorted. Right now, we'll suppose that 5 is the minimum value. So m is 5. 5 less than 4? No, it's greater, so we'll replace the minimum value by 4. 4 greater than 3, so we'll replace the minimum value by 3. Now we'll need to replace 3 and 5, so we'll swap them. What we'll get is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we got our sorted list, but we need to continue the loop. So we'll have this part as sorted and this part as unsorted, but in reality they are, but Python needs to continue the loop. So we'll suppose that 4 is the minimum value. We'll compare it to 5, nothing will happen. Okay, so Python will leave it alone. Then 5 is at the end and Python will stop. But how do we write this explanation in Python? So this is the selection sort function. First we need to iterate through this list. So for I, in range I will use, because I need to use index numbers, and I'll say len lst, of course -1 to not go out of range. Then what I'm gonna do is, I need to first specify or suppose that the first element is the minimum value. First I'll be needing its index, so I'll say index of min equal to I. Then I need the value, so I'll say value of min is equal to lst index I. So lst index I starts with 0, so the first element is 3. Next, we'll need to compare this value with the other numbers. So I'll be using a for loop, so for I in range I plus 1, because I'm reducing the size of the list to compare number 3 with the others, and then I'll say len lst. Next, we'll be needing to compare the numbers. Definitely I'll use an if statement. I'll say if lst, let me just change here to g, not I, okay? So I'll say if lst index g is less than value of min, what I'll do is I need to swap them. So I'll swap first the index, so index of min will become g. Next, I'll swap the values, so value of min is equal to lst index g. When the loop finishes, we need to swap the values to the correct position. As you remember, we swapped 1 and 3, 1 became at the place of 3. So 1 was here and 3 was there. How to do it here in Python? Well, I'll say lst index I is equal to 0, that means the first position will have which value? Of course 1. How to say it? Well, I'll say lst index of min. Because as you remember, we got as the smallest value 1. So 1 will be stored inside of this variable. Then we need to do another procedure, which is swapping 3 with 1. I'll say lst index of min, which represents the last position. So what I'll swap it with is the first element, lst index I. Well, we sorted our list. Now we go to insertion sort. So by the name insertion, you are inserting items. So each time we get a correct item, we insert it in the right position. So in this list in front of you, we'll use the same example. So the length is 5, and I'll write it over here. At the first iteration, we suppose that number 3 is the min value. Then what we'll do is, we'll compare 3 and 5. 5 is greater than 3, so nothing will happen, we won't swap anything. But we'll compare next 5 and 2. Well, 2 is less than 5. What will happen is I'm gonna store this value inside of M1, let's say, M1, and I'll write 2, and I'll overwrite this position by 5. So we'll have 5 here and 5 here. Then what we'll do is, we'll compare 2 and 3. Well, definitely 2 is less than 3, so 3 will overwrite this position. We'll have here empty, 3, and 5. So M1 will be stored in this position, so we'll get 2, 3, 5, 4, and 1. So we'll suppose that 3 is the minimum value, so M is 3, and this is in the second iteration, so 2 over here. We'll compare 3 and 5, nothing will happen. 3 and 4, nothing will happen. 3 and 1, well, 1 is actually less than 3, so we need to shift 1 to this position. What we'll do is, we'll store 1 in a variable, M1 let's say, stores 1. Next, 4 will overwrite this position, as well as 5 will come to this position. We'll move or shift the numbers to this side. So 1 is actually stored in a variable, and we overwrited 1 by 4, and 4 was overwritten by 5, and 5 was overwritten by 3. Now where are we going to place number 1? Definitely not in this position, so we should compare it with 2. Of course it's less than 2, so I'll erase 2 and add 1 here. So we shifted the position, so we got 1, 2, 3, 5, and 4. Right now we'll do the same procedure for us to get the sorted list 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what are we doing is, we're shifting the places of the numbers, so we put them in their correct order. So how to write this in Python? First, we need to iterate through the list. For I in range lst, first len lst, -1 of course, to not go out of range. Then what do you think we should do? As I said, we need to suppose that the first element is actually the minimum value. So we'll forget about it, and instead we'll jump to the next element and compare it with the first. So let's store in this x variable the element that comes after the first element, which is 5. So how to say it? I'll say I plus 1. So this is the index of the second element. Then let's store inside of the, let's say, element x variable the value. And I'll say lst index x. I'll say while x is greater than 0, and there's two conditions. The second condition will be element x is less than lst x minus 1. So what will happen is, if those conditions evaluate true, we'll execute the following block. So what I'll do is, I'll shift the positions. So lst index x will store lst x minus 1. So the second position will store the element that is at the first position, because first I is equal to 0, 0 plus 1 is 1, so lst index 1 is equal to lst x minus 1, that means the element that is at index 0. Then I'll decrement x by 1, so x minus equal to 1. As I said, we are shifting elements, so lst index x is equal to element of x. So let's print the list first, and let's see what is happening. So we got it sorted out. Let me just print at each iteration what's happening to the list. So I'll print lst over here. Okay. First, I is equal to 0. X equal to 0 plus 1, so x is equal to 1. Element of x will store 5, because 5 is at index 1. We'll go to this loop. X is 1 greater than 0 true, and element of x, which is 5, is less than lst x minus 1. That's false. 5 is actually greater than 3, so this will evaluate false and will jump to I equal to 1. X equal to 1 plus 1 is 2, so x is equal to 2. Element of x will store the third element inside of the list. In my case, it is 2. So we'll go to this loop. X, which is 2, greater than 0, yes. And element of x, which is 2, is less than lst x minus 1. That means lst index 1, which is number 5. Yes, it is less. So lst index 2, which is the position number 2, will store the value of position number 1, which is the index number 1, which is 5. So this position will store 5. And we know that right now we have 5 here and 5 here. But where is the 2? Well, the 2 is actually stored in this variable. I'll decrement x, x will become 1. But we still didn't finish the loop, because x is still greater than 0, and the element of x is still less than lst x minus 1. 2 is actually less than 3. When I say lst x minus 1, that means 1 minus 1, so it is lst index 0, which is 3. So because 2 is less than 3, what I'm gonna do is lst index 1 is equal to lst x minus 1. So the index number 1 will store the value of the index 0, which is 3. So we have here 3 and here 3 and right here 5. Right now we still have the 2 that is somewhere on space. What should we do now? Definitely the condition will evaluate false because x became equal to 0. What we'll do is I just place the 2 in its position. lst index 0 equals element of x. So 2 was stored here, and as it shows us in this list that 2 was at index 0. And we'll continue the same process until the loop terminates and we got the list sorted. And that is the insertion versus the selection sort. Alright, that brings us to the end. Thanks for watching today's video. This is TechSent, and I'll see you in the next one. Are you a beginner in Python? Make sure to check out this playlist about Python tutorials for beginners.